pilgrimage is one of those words that I think people use a lot, but I'm not sure that they always know what they mean when they're saying it. And it gets used in our secular society in ways that diminish the spiritual meaning and implications of it. People talk about pilgrimages to sporting events or shopping malls or annual family vacations as pilgrimages. And while there's something to those as special trips and journeys, they aren't quite the same as a faith-based pilgrimage. To do pilgrimage in the traditional Christian sense is to take a journey that is holy and set apart from everyday life to a destination that has meaning for our faith. It's much more than just a trip to the Super Bowl or a visit to grandma's every Thanksgiving. It is a journey that will take you to places that you never imagined, and it will take you in directions that will expand and deepen your faith. The two things that are important for us as Christians is that the journey be spiritual and that the destination be significant. So a journey that is a spiritual one for Christian pilgrims is something that is framed and marked by prayer, and it sets us apart from our ordinary lives. It takes us away from our usual routines and into time and space that are set apart, marked as holy. A pilgrimage journey has a beginning and it has an end, and participants know the boundaries between pilgrimage and everyday life. Whether they are explicitly aware of them or not, you know when you're on pilgrimage and when you're not. It could be as simple as when you arrive at the airport for a flight, or it could be as complicated as realizing several days into a bus trip somewhere that it is more than simply travel to another place, but in fact a spiritual journey. But at some point in the journey, pilgrims are able to identify and see themselves as pilgrims on a holy quest. So a pilgrimage doesn't always have to be to a very specific place, but there's usually a clear sense of the destination. One good example of that is pilgrimage to the Holy Land, where people might know that they are going to Jerusalem, but they don't necessarily know that their pilgrimage will be complete when they arrive at one particular spot on the journey. So pilgrimage is practiced by all of the world's major religions. And in fact, the traditions in the Judeo-Christian tradition go back very far. Some scholars have written about the story of Adam and Eve and the exile from the Garden of Eden as the beginning of pilgrimage, as the beginning of a journey that takes people in new directions to new relationship with God. Our scriptures are full of references to pilgrimage, beginning with the story of Abraham and his journey into the new land. By the time of Jesus, it was the practice of every Jewish family to engage in pilgrimage, when possible, to Jerusalem to celebrate the major festivals of the tradition. This meant that if you were a family living, say, in Nazareth, for 4 occasions of the year, if your family was able to do so, you would travel down to Jerusalem to participate in the Jewish holy days and the festivals there. That story, you remember the story of Jesus as a child in the temple from the 2nd chapter of Luke's Gospel? That's the story of a pilgrimage, Jesus and his family traveling south to Jerusalem to participate in the pilgrimage rites and rituals of the Jewish tradition. In the earliest years of the church, Christians began to travel on pilgrimage, and they traveled most often to Jerusalem at first to see the places where our story began. But over time, the practice of pilgrimage extended to many other destinations, to sites and monuments associated with important events and with holy people. By the 4th century, the practice of pilgrimage was well established for Christians, and a whole industry had sprung up around it. There were hostels, and there were souvenir sellers, and there were religious practices in Jerusalem and in other places, in Rome even, where people who were traveling on Christian pilgrimage could go and experience what it was like to be on this sacred journey. It was very different from tourism, tourism hadn't been invented at that time, but it was very different from business travel or even travel to see family or visit new sites, in that the trips that people took were informed by their faith, and led them to new understandings and new discoveries about who they were in relationship with God and one another. You know, there's some interesting research being done by some of the sociologists right now on pilgrimage. There's less research being done by theologians and religious studies types, but a lot of work being done by sociologists and even psychologists on who goes on pilgrimage. And one of the really interesting things that they've noticed is that the people who are drawn to pilgrimage are people who are already primed for transformation. They're people who are already open to something new and different, to God at work in their lives in often unexpected ways. So I hope this is an opportunity for you to open yourself to that, to know that God has called you into this journey, and that the practice of pilgrimage will be something that can change and even transform you.